Today I'm going to show you how to crochet these super cute daisy phone pouches in 2 different styles. I'm going to start with the design that has a single daisy on each side. To make these bags nice and sturdy, you're going to want to use a chunky weight yarn. I couldn't find the yarn I needed in the colours I wanted, so I instead opted for a 4-ply yarn, which I'm going to use 3 strands of. This will make it a similar thickness to a 14-ply or chunky weight yarn. You'll also need a darning needle, a pair of scissors and a crochet hook. To make this bag nice and sturdy, I'm going to size down my crochet hook and I'll be using a 3.5mm or E4 hook. Start by making a magic ring. Wrap the yarn around your left fingers twice, making a cross on the top. Insert your hook underneath and pull the left thread through. Take the magic ring off your fingers and then make a chain to secure. Then make 1 more chain. This will act as our first half double crochet for the round. To make a double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the ring and pull through a loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Make 6 more of these half double crochets into the ring. Counting the first 2 chains we made as a half double crochet, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now before we tighten this up, I'm just going to show you where we're going to join it to. Here's the first chain we made, and here's the second chain. And we're going to join into the top of this half double crochet here. First, tighten up your magic ring by pulling firmly on the tail, and then join with a slip stitch into this stitch I just showed you. Cut off your yarn and then pull this through firmly to make a slip knot. Here's the knot we just created. We're going to make our first petal into this stitch here. The second one goes here, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and the 8th petal goes here on the other side of the knot. Attach your next yarn to the hook with a slip knot. We're going to make the first half of a standing double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull through a loop so there's 3 on the hook. Then yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops on the hook. Normally we'd yarn over and pull through these last 2 loops, but instead we're going to make a cluster. Yarn over, insert your hook into the same space and pull through a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops on the hook. Then yarn over, insert your hook again into that same space, pull through a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2 loops on the hook. At this point you should have 4 loops on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 4 at once. This is a cluster stitch and it's your first petal. Then make 2 chains. Then we'll make another petal. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over, insert your hook in the same stitch, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Then yarn over, insert again into that same stitch and pull through a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Then yarn over and pull through all 4 loops on the hook. Then chain 2. Continue this all the way around until you have 8 petals. When you've finished your 8th petal, make 2 chains and then join with a slip stitch to the first stitch you created. Then trim your yarn and pull this through to create a slip knot. Attach your background colour to your hook with a slip knot, then chain 1. Then we're going to make a standing double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook into any of the spaces in between the petals and pull through a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops, then yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops on the hook. Then we'll double crochet. Yarn over, insert your hook and pull through a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through the last 2. Then do another double crochet. Now we're going to move on to the next gap in between petals. Into this one we'll make 3 half double crochets. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull through a loop and pull through all 3 on the hook. Do the same 2 more times. In the next petal gap, we're going to make a corner. To do this, we'll make 3 double crochets. Then chain 2, then do 3 more double crochets in that same space. In the next gap between petals, we're going to go back to doing 3 half double crochets. And in the gap after this, we'll do another corner using double crochets. Continue this pattern all the way around until you have the 4 sides of the square finished. Once you're at the end of the round, you'll make 1 more chain and then join to the first chain we made at the start of the round. From here, we'll make 3 chains. This will act as the first double crochet in the next round. Then yarn over and go into the same space we just chained up from and make a double crochet. Then make another double crochet in this same space. This is the first half of this corner. Then move on to the next gap and make 3 double crochets in this space. In the next space, make another 3 double crochets. Then it's time for our corner. Make 3 double crochets. Then chain 2 and make 3 more double crochets. Continue this pattern all the way around. At this point, check to see if your square is a good size for your phone pouch. If it's a bit small, just add another round. Here I'm finishing my last double crochet, then I'll make 2 chains and I'll join it to the top of the 3rd chain that I made at the start of the round. Trim your yarn off with a tail 3 times longer than the side of the square because we're going to use this to stitch it up. Pull this tail through and make a slip knot to fasten. Then we need to weave in the ends. Make sure your magic ring is nice and secure, then feed this tail onto a darning needle, insert this under a few stitches, and then pull this back through the loop it creates. Fasten this off to make a knot. Then repeat this process to make another knot. Tighten this knot off and then feed the ends through under a few stitches before trimming this off. All the other ends in this square have been tied off, so all you need to do is weave them in and then trim them off. Then make 1 more of these squares. Before we sew the squares together, feed your yarn end onto a darning needle and stitch this back a few spots so you get to the corner space. Stitch up through the back loop only of the first chain of the corner. Then we're going to sew down this side. We're going to sew into the back loops only. So here my yarn is coming out of the back loop of this stitch here, and I'm going to go down through the back loop of this corresponding stitch over on this side. Then on the left square, I'll go to the next stitch up and stitch down through the back loop of this stitch. Then on the right square, I'll find the next stitch up and go through the back loop of this stitch. Then move back to the left square and go into the next stitch up through the back loop. Always stitching down through the back loops of each next stitch along. Continue this all the way to the end. I'll show you from this angle so it might be a little bit easier to see. When you get to the final stitch at the corner, stitch down through this, and then I'm going to tie it off into this stitch here, but before I do that, I like to tighten it by holding the yarn end and then pulling from the other side, making sure I get a nice even seam. Then tie your yarn end off and weave this back through the seam. Sew the other side of the squares up so you've got a tube like this. Then with a slip knot on your hook, we're going to locate one of the side seams and make a standing double crochet into the corner space here. Then we'll make a double crochet into this seam here. Then do another double crochet into the corner space on the other square. Then we're going to do 3 double crochets into each gap along. When you get to the other side seam, do it the way we just did then, with a double crochet in the corner, then the seam, then the next corner along. When you get to the end of the round, join with a slip stitch to the top of that standing double crochet. Then insert your hook into the space just below here. Pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through these. Then make 2 chains. This will act as our first double crochet. Then do 2 more double crochets into this same space. Normally I'd move on and do another 3 double crochet in the next space, but here I'm going to do a single chain just to add a little bit more room to help accommodate that side seam. Then in the next space, do 3 more double crochets. You'll do 3 double crochets in each space all the way around, but above the other seam, add in that extra chain. At the end of the round, join with a slip stitch to the top of the 3rd chain you made at the start of the round. Then go into this space underneath the hook, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through the 2 loops on the hook. Then chain 2. This is your first double crochet. Then do 2 more double crochets in this space. Make 3 double crochets into each space all the way around. At the end of the round, join with a slip stitch to the top of that 3rd chain. Then trim your yarn off so you've got enough length to sew this bottom seam up. Pull this through the loop on the hook and tighten to fasten. With your darning needle, stitch back through the loops at the top so you get to the edge. From here, we're going to do a similar stitch to what we did before, but instead we're going to go through both the top loops of each stitch instead of just the back loop. This will make our seam a little bit sturdier for the base of the bag. Stitch down through the top loops of the stitch on one side and then move to the other side, find the next stitch along and go through the top loops of these ones. Then move to the other side of the bag, find the next stitch along and stitch down through the top loops of these. It's easier with this type of seam to tighten it as you go. Continue this all the way along until you get to the end. At the end of the seam, feed your needle into the bag and then flip the bag inside out. Then you're going to want to tie this off in just the same way we did when we were tying off the center yarn from the magic ring before. Once these knots are tightened off, weave your yarn end in along this bottom seam and then trim it off. It's looking pretty great so far, so I'm going to just do exactly what I did before and create these 3 rows up at the top, but I won't sew the seam up. Then we've got to make the strap. To do this you need 2 strands of yarn. Because I'm using my triple stranded yarn, I'm going to put these in 2 different piles so I don't get confused. Take these 2 strands and then make a slip knot and put this on your hook. Then you want to separate out these strands so that you've got one in front and one behind. With the strand that's in front, wrap this around your hook from front to back and put this down the bottom. Then, with the other strand, pick this up with your hook and pull it through. And then repeat this. With the front strand, wrap this around from front to back, pick up your yarn from the back and pull this through. Again, from front to back with the front yarn, and then pick up the back yarn and pull this through. Keep doing this the entire way along until your strap measures the length you want it to be. Remember, when your phone is in the bag, the strap will stretch a little bit, so keep this in mind when deciding how long to make it. When you get the strap to the desired length, trim off your yarn ends with enough so you'll be able to sew these on, and then pull them through to make a knot. To sew this onto the bag, find the middle double crochet on the side seam and stitch into this from front to back. Pull the knot so it's sitting just where this stitch is. Then stitch from the back to the front of the stitch to the left, pulling this nice and tight. Then stitch down into the first stitch of the strap. Then stitch from the back to the front of the stitch to the right of this. Then, once again, stitch through the first stitch of the strap. Then turn your work over and then tie this end off just the way we were doing before. Feed it under a few stitches and then go back through the loop you have just created. Pull this nice and tight. Do this again to make it extra secure, and then feed this yarn end down through the body of the bag to the side seam. Then trim off the end. Repeat this process for stitching the other end of the strap onto the opposite side of the bag. And that's it, all you got to do to make this super cute phone pouch. Now I'll show you how I made this double stacked granny square pouch. For this one, I had the perfect colour yarn in a chunky weight or 14 ply. I made 4 squares in exactly the same way as I showed you at the start of the video. However, I'll make one change here to the way I slip stitched them together at the end. Instead, I pull up a loop, take my hook out, flip my work over, and then insert my hook through the stitch I'm going to slip stitch into from the back to the front. Put the loop back on your hook, tighten this off, pull it through, then pull through your yarn end and tighten off. Keep your yarn end really long because we're going to use the flat slip stitch method to join these squares. This slip knot method helps the knot sit at the back of the square, which will help when we're joining them together. With your long yarn end between 2 squares, insert your hook into the back loop of the second chain on one square and the back loop of the corresponding chain on the other square. Then pick up your yarn with your hook and pull this through one square and then through the next square. If you need to, lengthen this stitch a little bit by pulling up so it's the same length as the stitches around the edge of the squares. Then find the next stitch along, go through the back loop of this, and then on the other square, go through the back loop of the next stitch along. Yarn over your hook, and then pull it through the first square, and then the next square. And then the loop on the hook. Again, you may need to adjust the size of this stitch as you're working. Then, in the next stitch along, go through the back loop of this one, and on the other square, go through the back loop of the next stitch. Then yarn over your hook, and pull this through one square, the next square, and then the loop on the hook. Continue doing this all the way along until you get to the end. When you're at the end, go through your final 2 stitches, through the back loops only, pull the yarn through, and then pull the tail through the loop on the hook and tighten this off to fasten. Repeat this for the other set of squares. This is our front and back. Then we'll do the same method to join up along the side, the base, and then up the other side, all in one go. To start, get your ball of yarn and lay this down between the 2 panels. Then go through the back loop of the first chain of the corner on one square and the corresponding chain on the other square, through the back loop as well. Then pick up your yarn onto your hook, pull this through one square, pull it through the second square, and then pull this up to the desired height. Then find the next stitch along and go down through the back loop of this, then do the same on the other square, down through the back loop, yarn over, pull this through one square, pull it through the next, and pull it through the loop on the hook. Continue doing this all the way along. When I get to the center seam, I'll go through the back loops of these stitches here, in through the loops of these stitches on the seams, and then through the back loops of these stitches over here. At the bottom, we'll keep working around so our seam is one continuous length. Go down through the back loops on either square, yarn over, and pull this through. Continue all the way around the curve, along the bottom edge and up the other side of the bag. And here's our bag all stitched together, looking very neat and adorable. Now we're going to add the strap. I'm going to use the same method for this strap as I did earlier in the video. When you get to the end of the seam, pull a loop up, take your hook out and get an extra piece of yarn. Pull this through and attach it with a knot. You'll make this strap using 2 lengths of yarn at the same time. You need quite a lot of yarn, so make sure you've got enough. Tie this off and then we'll weave in this end later. Put your hook back on the loop and tighten this off. The yarn we were using when we made the seam is going to be our back yarn for making this strap, and the yarn we just attached is the front yarn. Take the front yarn and wrap this around your hook from the front to the back. Then take the back yarn, yarn over and pull this through both loops on the hook. Then take your front yarn, wrap this around the hook from front to back, and then yarn over your back yarn and pull this through both. Again, the front yarn goes over from front to back, and then you pick up the back yarn with your hook and pull this through both loops on the hook. Keep doing this until the strap is the length you want it to be. Remember, it'll stretch a bit when there's a phone in the bag, so keep this in mind when deciding how long to make it. This stitch creates a really nice continuation from the joining method we used on the seam. Now I'm at the end of my strap. I'm going to take my hook out and take the back yarn and feed this onto my darning needle. Then I'm going to stitch up through the loop I left when I took my hook out. Then find the top chain of that seam and stitch through from right to left. Then stitch down through the loop on the end of the strap. This will create a seamless join between your stitches. Then tighten this off and turn to the inside. Feed this yarn through under a few stitches. Then feed your needle under some yarn and then go back through the loop you've just created. Pull this nice and tight to create a knot. Then take the other end from when you were making the strap and find the end of yarn you used at the very start when you started that seam of the bag. Tie these two together in a double knot. Then weave in all these yarn ends and trim. And then your phone pouch is all done and looking super sweet. Let me know in the comments below which one you prefer, the single daisy or the stacked pair. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more crafty videos.